is a very unconventional fireside chat. We're just going to talk to each other, basically, ask each other questions.
That's right. I think I used to be in audiences here before where I'm like, I just want to listen to two people talk for a change. So this is the chance.
How should we start? How about you start with your background to bring us up to today, and I'll do the same, and then we can go from there.
Okay, cool. So, my background's not that unconventional from most people who came from India to the US in the 90s. So I've been living here for over 25 years now. And I came here for grad school, just like most of my peers at that time did. And I landed up not too far from you, Brad, because I landed up in Urbana-Champaign, very close to Chicago. And I had no idea what I was getting into because it was really, really cold coming from Bombay. Which, for reference, Bombay is at 45 degrees today. And
we're not that far off in Chicago.
I think I landed in Chicago in August, and it was like 15 degrees. And I thought like I was in the middle of winter, which I had no idea what winter really felt like. So I lived in the Midwest for about 8 years, went to business school on the East Coast, progressively going to colder climates. And at that point, a light bulb struck me and said, go out west, young man, because that's where the action is. So I started a company there while I was in school, came here, raised money in 2000, and ran the company for a while in back-end infrastructure-heavy business, software business. Then went on to Google, started the mobile business there, ran the Asia Pacific product portfolio. Went to LinkedIn. I was there for about 6 years, as Z was mentioning. I built that product from about 20 to 30 million users to about 500 million users before I left. At that time, it struck me that maybe I should work a little less, and I decided to take a temporary sabbatical, which didn't last very long, and I ended up at SoftBank, enamored with Masa's vision, a 300-year vision of how to change the world, and it's been a blast ever since. How about you, Brad?
I started in the cold in Michigan and didn't go far to Chicago, but I went to law school, but I've been starting and building companies for 25 years. So I've had the same business partner for my whole life, my whole career. And what we've done is basically look for opportunities within industries. So if there's a formula, you would only see it looking in the rearview mirror. But the formula is around finding opportunities where data, aggregation, collection, creation, plus technology in different flavors and forms, plus insight enabled by different levels of analytics and technology results in some opportunity to disrupt or change the way an industry works. And we've done it in the freight and logistics space, with a company called Echo Global Logistics. We've done it in the media space with MediaOcean, which is the operating system now for most of the world's media buying. A company called Interworkings in the printing space. And if anything, Groupon is an exception. It's the one consumer-facing business that we created. But all of that, in my case, has led to an opportunity that I'm not sure you can see unless you've had 20 years of pattern recognition. But the opportunity is called Uptake. It's a company that's less than 3 years old. Bill did a nice job of explaining the global opportunity around industrial insight. I think my 2 cents in the conversation is that there is a clear distinction and a choice that every player or interested player will make, and that is, what is the role of an entrepreneurial company in the ecosystem of giants? And is an approach that actually results in a solution to your problem the preferred way to solve the problem, or is the approach of using a platform to then build your own solution the way to solve your problem? I believe that based upon the computing power, the sensor availability and commoditization, the analytics, firepower that can be deployed through technology, it allows us at Uptake to actually create solutions. And so if you think about the SaaS business construct applied to industrial insight and the industrial world, our perspective is that what's really interesting and needed by the wind turbine space, for example, or the oil and gas space, they need answers. And if you can provide answers that can be subscribed to, where you plug in your machines, you plug in your factory, and what you get is the actual answer, that's a very interesting proposition.
So that all sounds great on paper, right? I worked at a giant industrial company, Cummins Engines, for many years, and the procurement processes are very slow. It's not like they're not innovative, but they have to be very deliberate and considerate how they buy software. They're not that trusting of some startup with $2 billion in valuation and some guy who's been building Groupon and all kinds of other companies. And when Bill comes in and says, look, we are GE, we've been here forever, and we can solve your problems. How do you compete in that kind of space?
It's the classic construct. It's an entrepreneurial approach versus a legacy extension approach. And you compete. If you're the entrepreneur, you've got to earn your stripes. So there is no brand to sort of fly under. You have to be out there creating solutions. I mean, we announced a commercial relationship with Berkshire Hathaway in the wind turbine space. I mean, Berkshire had every choice available. I mean, Berkshire's one of the iconic names in the energy business, and they chose Uptake. We created the solution that they were looking for. And for us, a solution is empirical. It creates one of three outcomes: productivity, reliability, and or safety. And if we can't demonstrate that you make money, that you're better off with us than without us, you're not going to buy our product. So I think that added level of prove it that is required of the entrepreneurial approach gives us an edge. And culturally, we're now 720 people, up from 31 months ago. We've had to create every part of that solution without limitation. In other words, we didn't have the whole thing has to work. We can't afford to plug in different pieces that are dependencies, because if any of those things goes wrong, I'm not interested in what we're doing not working. Yeah. And so that's the entrepreneurial mindset, which then brings me to ask you something we were talking about earlier. Given that mindset, which is it has to work, and we have to be resourceful every minute of the way, which is the best outcome with the best resource at the time. When you think about what you did at LinkedIn, what you were part of, the replatforming, that was one of the more remarkable stories of switching the engines out when the plane was flying.
Yeah.
What lessons can you share about that experience that are applicable to all of us?
Yeah. The first is, don't put yourself in that position. Because it can be very fatal. And many people don't realize, but a lot of the problems that we try to solve already have solutions that were available to us in history, but we just don't look back far enough. Or many of us are way too young to know what history was telling us at that time. So there used to be a very famous and popular social network in the US called Friendster. In 2002, 2003 timeframe. Does anyone know of or remember Friendster? Very popular. In 2004, 2005 timeframe, so right as they were picking up steam, they ran into a very serious problem. Their infrastructure could not keep up with the growth that they were seeing. And the growth in networks is actually exponential, because you're not just talking about the new members that come into your system, but it's all the connections that they have with each other. And how are you going to understand the relationships between them? So they took a very crucial decision. They stopped all new feature development for 1 year while they were replatforming their underlying system, because they just couldn't keep up. They were dying. Users couldn't get onto their system, things were not working. In that one crucial year, something else came up called MySpace. And they basically cleaned out Friendster's clocks. And Friendster became a non-entity in the United States. And so, I had seen this movie before. I was at Google at that time. And Google, conversely, has always been about building things for scale. It's not about, it would be a great problem to have if this product that I launch had 10 million users tomorrow. Right? That's not a great problem. That's like you have to anticipate having 100 million users. And so I learned a very valuable lesson that I've I teach this class on product management at Stanford now every spring, and I talk about my 7 principles of building great products. And one of them is you have to prototype for 1x, you have to engineer for 10x, but you have to architect for 100x. Whatever it is that your use case is going to be, you have to really be prepared for it. And because you're architecting for 100x, not building for it, it's not like you're buying a lot of iron and spending a lot of capital in order to prepare for it, but you've thought through the consequences of that. So how does this apply to LinkedIn? In LinkedIn, we are facing a similar challenge. The company had been started in 2003. By the time I got to it in 2009, we were growing nicely, but many of our systems were built in the early web era. So we had big Oracle databases, we had big Sun Solaris servers, and the whole world was moving to web scale and cloud computing at that point. And we had to really make that change. And I had to work in very close partnership with my engineering partner. And we basically said, we will plan for a year as opposed to re-architect for a year and get to a point where we can do the entire re-architecture in 3 months. And that's what we did.
But you had to build ahead of that. You literally, you planned, in other words, you didn't interrupt or affect the operations of the technology team until you were fully prepared and ready.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and we did for 3 months. And this was a responsibility that my team took as the product team. We said, you don't have to build any new features and we'd be okay.
I'll tell you what's interesting.
That was really difficult at that time, by the way.
Well, the correlation for our world is we look at, so I've not spent my life in industrial America or industrial world or enterprise software, but I have spent enough time in my life creating different approaches to the enterprise operational problem through software to have enough of a perspective to ask why. I'm pretty good at asking why.
Yeah.
And in the course of asking why, I came across this mentality in major industry that in order to do something like you're talking about, it affected all operations. You had to rethink. That was like this change management thing. Like there has to be change management if you're going to have a better infrastructure, better platform, better insight, if you will.
Yeah.
And then the question was why?
Yeah.
And why can't you just insert the insight where it's most needed? Why disrupt operations, number one? And also, it led us to say things like, why is there a required layer of configuration and consulting and SI if an industrial player wants an answer? I mean, why can't you walk in with an understanding of that vertical and an ability to plug their operations in and provide an answer? So it's just interesting, over and over, the lessons that have been created from scratch, in a brand new world called manufacturing software, manufacturing code, this new manufacturing of code is, to me, an abstract for rethinking the world of industry, manufacturing, process. It's like, you ever read The Goal?
Yes, of course.
It's like
required reading.
Yeah, right. The new version of The Goal is being written right now.
Okay.
In the last decade, I would say, about how are complicated problems being solved in terms of building software, building platforms, building outcomes.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Let's talk about, my turn, I'll pick a topic. Let's talk about platforms themselves.
Okay.
So our approach to a platform is that the platform has to have all components. In other words, plugging in a bunch of things makes it more complicated, makes it more risky, more expensive, and more unlikely to work. As a result, what we built at Uptake, literally from the data coming in to the outcome or the insight coming out, everything that exists between, we've built. You saw another approach, which is GE's, which is the platform has a bunch of components inside of it, and then you can build on top of that platform with dependencies within. What are your thoughts about optimal platforms today, and given that you've had so much pattern recognition in the world of technology creation and platform building, what do you see that maybe none of us see?
Yeah, in terms of platforms, I'm not so sure that I'm 100% aligned with the way you're thinking about it, which is you have to have a soup to nuts platform. I think it's very context dependent. So for the kinds of customers that you have, it may be the right solution, because a Caterpillar or a Cummins or any of these companies, which are not traditionally application software companies, which is what you're providing, they may want a one-stop solution. But if you are going and selling into a technology company, for example, they may say, look, give me the best of this, and I know how to piece together the things I want to do using the APIs that you provide me. So don't give me a black box, give me a box that I understand and I want to assemble the pieces that I want. That's a matter of perspective and context and how comfortable your customers are. In terms of learnings, I think one of the biggest opportunities right now is staring us in our face, which most people sitting in these zip codes don't quite get. And something that I saw fortuitously just by virtue of the first job I took out of graduate school 25 years ago, which is the notion of IoT. It's a new term, but it has existed for a long time. Plants, engines, machinery has always had lots and lots of sensors. And all of this data was effectively either being thrown away, so we were doing sampling because we couldn't really collect all that data, or it was being stored at very high cost because storage is very expensive, and it was never sent to the cloud because the connectivity and the cloud costs were high, or cloud didn't exist 20 years ago. And there was no compute available. So even if you could do all of that, what did you do with that data? So you just created pretty charts. And you send them to your plant manager and to the VP of operations and ultimately to the CEO saying, this is our uptime, this is when we have to do our servicing of our machines, etc. Today, that whole thing has changed completely. So this deluge of data, we don't have to throw away, number one, because storage is cheap. We can sample every little piece. Secondly, connectivity is getting a lot cheaper. So we can put all of this in the cloud. And the cost per gigabyte, cost per petabyte is going down. And new computing models have come up in the last decade, right? Things around computational neural networks, deep learning, algorithms on machine learning. And these are not locked behind closed doors of the likes of Google and Facebook and Baidu and Alibaba, but they are available to all of us. These are mostly open source algorithms. It's a matter of implementing them. So all of a sudden, we are unlocking huge potential in this data that has been available for a really long time. And I honestly believe over the next 10 to 20 years, the way we think about these industries and productivity and our ability to understand how these businesses work, how can we make them more efficient and better, and really be competitive on a global stage is going to change in a big way, which opens up huge investment opportunities for both your firm and mine.
Yeah, and I think that the dynamics that you're talking about, which is commoditization of sensors and really amazing advances in connecting to the cloud in a variety of ways, all of those things speak to this unlocking of an opportunity. And the and is how much innovation can you create right now to be a first mover for the long haul, not a first mover to get a user. And I mean, the economics are so much larger and so much more substantial than an e-commerce or social network. But we had to create, for example, the ability to deploy models in days, not months or quarters.
Yeah.
And so we deploy models right now in about 3 days. And that historically is 6 months in a company. Why? Because when we're gaining new data and we're then seeing when we make a recommendation how that human being responds to our insight, which is don't put this locomotive, here we are sitting in Chicago, don't put this locomotive in Australia on the line for the mission because it's not equipped, right. It's not in the health state that the mission needs. That recommendation then is responded to by a person who says, yes, I checked it out and you're right, or no, you're wrong, or yes, you're right, but what the computer advised, which is fix it by doing this, there's a better fix. That integration of a data science with an insight, incorporating then an action that can then inform the data science, if you get that right, you are creating productivity and reliability and efficiency and safety, and you're also creating a whole new horizon of ideas. So when we talked about platforms and applications, to me, we expose APIs to our clients, absolutely, that's core to who we are. And we allow you to build applications on top of the Uptake platform, core to who we are. But we have to start by delivering value.
Yeah.
I think today in the world of major industry, it's a prove it stage. And the proving it being an entrepreneurial organization, we have to earn our stripes. And that's what's fun, is that we actually are tasked with the empirical evidence we have to create and we have to deliver, which is, when you turn on Uptake, are you better off than you were before? And to me, that's the ultimate SaaS model. Right. The ultimate way is that you can rent an outcome, pay a subscription for an outcome that makes you better as a company. That's pretty amazing. And 25 years of building companies, you see something as significant, as substantial, and empirical as the industrial insight opportunity, and your perspective on the world changes.
Yeah. Let's take, we have a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk about one additional thing, and it's a conclusion that both I arrived and you and your partner Eric arrived at, sort of almost in parallel, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit. So about 4 years ago, I came to the realization that we were experiencing another Moore's Law-like phenomena, an exponential curve that was going to completely change the way we live, and most people were oblivious to it, which was the cost of human genome sequencing had been going down exponentially. So 15 years ago, it cost $100 million to sequence one genome, and today it costs $1,000. That's a $100,000 times decrease in cost, which is even more exponential than Moore's Law. And as a result of that, I started investing in computational biology companies where I'm saying, look, there's all this data that's coming in. It's going to be very economical for us to collect this data. We are going to find all kinds of amazing insights about the way we are, and not just multi-cell bodies like human beings, but all the way down to single-cell organisms. And that's going to create all kinds of opportunity. And one of them is in cancer science. And we have a great investment called Garden Health that does liquid biopsies and tries to figure out cancer mutations and really help people, talk about true impact. You guys have started a company in cancer biology and software as well. Yeah. So tell me your thought process and how did you guys end up there?
It is interesting. We found this in parallel, totally separate. So my focus is Uptake. Eric's focus, we started a company called Tempus. And the ability to sequence genomes of cancers themselves opens up a whole new way to think about cancer. Breast cancer happens to be exposed, to be found in a breast, but the cancer itself, it'd be a crude way to say it's breast cancer.
Right.
All breast cancer is not the same.
Exactly.
And right now, the different categories of breast cancer are still very crude representations of the. So the question is, what if you could actually identify the exact makeup of that cancer, and then have enough perspective to know on every other instance where that mutation showed up in that location in a body, what the history was that led to that moment, and then what the treatment was after, and whether it worked, and what about it might have worked. So that's a data problem to us. That's a technology problem to us. And the fact is, the capture of data is now commoditized, and then what? And the what to us is, who's better equipped to solve the problem of finding patterns that lead to insight, that lead to better outcomes? Mm-hmm. The government? Perhaps. Big industry associations? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Our bias, of course, is that an entrepreneurial approach to connecting the dots and finding the shortest distance between A and B is the way that this country has become so extraordinary, and is also the answer to the problem of better health outcomes for cancer. So I think we're both on the same page. This is obviously a long journey, but I know a little bit about the company you invested in. I can tell you, in terms of Tempus, the momentum and the real substantial progress on a weekly basis in terms of advancing the size of the database, the web of collaborative partners, and then the data science around outcomes is extraordinary. It's really there's a lot of, just when you thought there was not much more opportunity, this is 2017 comes around. So.
I think we're just getting started, but our time's up.
Anyway, so
thank you very much, everyone.